Hi class. We're continuing on in chapter 2, which is picturing variation with graphs. And just as a reminder, these are the chapter 2 topics that we were looking at, right? So overall. So now we're in section 2.3, which is titled Visualizing Variation and Categorical Variables. Right, so one thing you want to recall is what the difference is between categorical versus numerical variables, right? So remember that categorical variables are also called qualitative variables, right? And this is where we're putting things in categories, and typically our data is presented in words in that case. Right? And then we also have numerical data, which is also known as quantitative data, which that data is usually presented in terms of numbers, right? So we went over that in more detail in previous video, but just remembering the difference, right? So right now we're looking at how do we visualize categorical variables. So one way to visualize data with categorical variables is that we can use a bar chart, right? And one thing you want to note above, so I said that we treat categorical variables similar to numerical variables, right? So we treat them in similar ways. So one way we can display them is using a bar chart, and this is very similar to a histogram, which we explored earlier. And this is able to record data categories along the horizontal axis, and then the height corresponding to the frequency of the data, right? So on the next slide, I have an example of a bar chart, and this was presented in the text, right? So the text talked about measuring all the students that were in a UCLA statistics class over the summer, and they were trying to find out, investigate, do we typically have students that are trying to get their gen eds out of the way early, or students putting it off, and so forth. So we have these different categories. So this table shows like a summary of our data, right? So remember, this wouldn't be the raw data, because the raw data would be how we collect the data before we've done anything with it, right? So this was taking the raw data and put in this table for convenience, and we counted the frequency of how many people fit in each of these categories, right? So we had a total of 20 individuals that were measured. So then on the right, this is an example of a bar chart, right? So notice at the top we have a title. Along the bottom, we also have a title for our variables, which is class, and then everything's broken out. So we have graduate, junior, senior, sophomore, and then unknown, which was presented in our table, right? And notice first year student isn't listed at the bottom because that came up 0 times, so we just left that out in our chart because that might be confusing for the reader. And then on the vertical axis, that's labeled as relative frequency. So remember, relative frequency is where you take the frequency divided by the total. So this comes up with some percentage, which we call the relative frequency, right? So for example, for the unknown status, we had 7 people listed, right? So let me bring up my calculator. Oops. All right. Use this one for a moment. Right, so here's my calculator, so I can take 7 divided by 20, right? So this gives me my percentage in decimal form, 35%. So notice if I follow my unknown table over, right, it's consistent with 35%. Right, so that's how we get those values. Right. So on the next slide, I have just comparing the difference between a bar chart versus a histogram. Right? Oh, and one other thing I wanted to mention on the previous slide, right, is that class, right here at the bottom, this is a type of categorical variable, right? So it's categorical because we have different categories. So people are falling within these specific categories. So that's listed. So a lot of times in categorical variables, we are simply just counting how many people fit in that category, right? So that's pretty frequent. Right. So then this chart, as I was saying, we're comparing bar chart versus a histogram. So bar charts and histograms may look very similar, but they are different. So these are some key differences that were presented in the text, right? So the histogram, the bars may touch. In fact, I've always learned that the bars need to be touching, right? And that so we'll go along with that philosophy. So in other words, a histogram, the bars should be touching, and the bar width is going to correspond to the bin width, right? So remember, with a histogram, we set up bin widths or class intervals to describe the range of data we were counting in our data set. So the bar width in a bar chart, right, this can be any desired width that you would like, but all the bars need to be the same width, right? So then with a histogram, the horizontal labels are in numerical order, right? So with a histogram, we have a number line at the bottom, right? So everything is labeled in numerical order, where with a bar chart, there's no inherent order, right? Meaning with a bar chart, we can change the order however we would like, right? And then also one thing we want to note that was presented in the text is we can also look at a special type of bar chart, which is called a Pareto chart, right? So a Pareto chart is a bar graph in which the bars are arranged from tallest to shortest, right? So we reorder the bars going from tallest to shortest. And this, just a note here that this can't, really be done in a histogram, right? So we can't just take a histogram and move the bars around, right? So that kind of gives notes another key difference about how we can simply just move the bars around in a bar chart, where in a histogram that doesn't make sense, right? We can't do that. Right. So then this slide, we want to visualize data using a pie chart, right? So a pie chart is another distinct way that we can visualize qualitative data. So a pie chart is where we have a circle that's dividing into pieces, right? And something that's very nice about a pie chart is we can typically see which category is bigger and smaller. We can determine what's the most people in each category, what's the smallest amount, right? A bar chart can also tell us this, but sometimes you may want to display your information in a pie chart. Now, one thing that a bar chart is better at doing than a pie chart is if you have a lot of categories that are close together, a bar chart is typically better because you can more easily distinguish which category is bigger than another category. Where in a pie chart, it's visually harder to notice sizes that are very similar. Right? So then here's just an example, or going along with our previous example. So we still have the same frequency table, right, with class and frequency, and then we just use this information to create a pie chart, right? And so if you have the relative frequency, which is a percent, so with the unknown, right, if you recall, we had 35%, right, so 0.35. So you should know at this point that there are 360 degrees in a circle, right? So if I take 35% of 360 degrees, right, we get 126. So this angle here for the unknown slice, right, that should be 126 degrees, right? So if you were doing this by hand, that's how you would go about making a pie chart, you would need to have a protractor and measure those angles and use a ruler, right, straight edge, so forth, to make a nice diagram. However, you may have done that in the past, but in my opinion, it's not very practical today, right? So with the vast amount of technology and being able to print things, making a pie chart by hand isn't real practical. I think it could have some value today still, being able to draw a pie chart by hand, because then you really, by doing so, you can really know how to make a pie chart, how it works, and be able to apply that when you read a pie chart. Excuse me. Right. So in summary, we have three charts to display categorical data, right? That's presented in this section. So we can use a bar chart, a Pareto chart, which remember is a special type of bar chart, or we can also use a pie chart, right? So we looked at all three of these. And in the homework for this section isn't really difficult. It's just being able to read and draw some conclusions from different graphs, right? So what I wanted to do was spend some time showing you how you can make a bar chart and a pie chart in R and Excel, right? So I have an example to go through with you. So I posted this Word file on Canvas. So this is just giving us an example of using bar and pie charts, right? And so it says that you're working for a law office in Columbus, Ohio, and you want to present some data to the partners of the firm about last month's expenses. Below is the data for last month's expenses, right? So we're given a table. So here's my expense category, and then here's my expense amount. So we have payroll, office rent, utilities, office supplies, and miscellaneous, and then the following amounts, right? And note that it's noted here that it's in US dollars. So what we'd like to do, number one, is create a bar chart and a pie chart to present your data in R. Then number two, do the same thing, but do it in Excel, right? So I'm going to do that, and I'm just going to paste these inside of this Word document, right? So for our reference, so I can show you how you might want to use those charts. So another thing on Canvas that you should have is I posted this TXT text file, right? So a lot of times when you are doing any type of coding, right, which R is a type of a coding language, right, that we're inputting into this program and doing some statistics with it. So a common type of file used is a text file, which is just a lot easier to use than like a Word file. So it's very basic. It doesn't have a lot of formatting features, right? So I pasted all the codes I'm going to use in R. So I'm actually going to just copy these. So just select and right click and hit copy. And now what I want to do is open R, right? And again, if I go to edit and then GUI preferences, we can make the text larger. I'm going to make that larger so you can see this better. Right, so I use size 14 font. Right, so if you're copying and pasting commands into R, you can do this a couple of different ways. So what we could do, let me kind of go split screen on you. One thing I could do is I could copy one line at a time, right? So I could copy this line and paste into here and then hit enter, and it will store that, right, just fine. Or instead of doing this each time, what I can do, so let me copy this again, right, so that way it's stored, is what you can do is we can go to File, and then you can go to new script. Right, and I'm going to click this to make it so I can have more than one window. Right, let me just resize these. So actually, let's put this one over here. So I urge you, as I'm going through this, to open up R and do this with me. Right. Alright, so let me paste this here. Right. So if I'm on this line, so this top line, so what this is doing is I'm naming the expenses variable the following, right? And the C command enables us to list data values, right? So instead of uploading data into Excel and then uploading that into R, if we only have like a small amount of data values, we can just type those in, right? So what I can do is I can just click in this line and I can hit this button, run line, and it will run it, right? So notice it popped up over here, right? And I did copy and paste it and run it, so that's not a big deal, right? It's just the same thing. And remember, when I'm naming some data in R, nothing is good at this point, right? And then before, in a previous video, I believe I showed you how you could name data like this. Right? So I'll just copy this and paste, right, rather than typing all that in, right? So you could also use this symbol, which is you hold Shift and then the comma key and then the dash button beside 0, right? You can use that, or you can just use the equal sign, right? Whatever is easier, whatever works for you, right? Either one is okay, right? So far, all I've done is tell Excel, hey, here's some data, please call this expenses, right? So then I can refer to that specific data as expenses, right? So then this next line is just naming the variable colors, right? So I'm telling Excel, these are the list of colors I want, right? And the order matters here, right? So the 42,000, right? That was the payroll, right? So I'm going to tell R I want that to be red, right? So the order of the color matters depending on what color you want for each variable, right? If you don't care, then it wouldn't be a big deal, right? So I'm going to run this line, right? So again, if you're just clicked in this line, you just click up here, run line or selection, right? So I click that and nothing is good here again, right? I just name colors. So then now I'm on the line pie, right? So this command tells R that you want to create a pie chart. Where it says expenses, you're telling R what data do you want to use, and then this code is telling Excel what colors you want to use, right? So COL equals tells Excel what colors, and then remember I named my list of colors, right, up here in the second line. So now if I run this line of code, I get a pie chart, right? So here's the pie chart that I'm getting. Right, so let me fix this a little bit. Right? So we ran that line. So with that open, I'm going to run this line, title, right? So if I run that, notice it adds a title, right? But let's say I want to change the title, right? Maybe I want it to be just last month, right? So if I run this line now, notice what it did is it just put the previous title on over top the other title, right? So if you want a new title, what you have to do is exit out of that, and then we have to go back up and run the code starting at pie, right? So then I can hit this, and then So I ran the pie code, and then that creates the pie chart. And then I can go to title, right? I want to add a title to this pie chart. Then I can go to this code and run that, and then notice my title is there now, right? So let me exit this, and then I'm going to put the previous title that we had back on there, right? So now I can run the pie code and then the title code, and now we're good, right? So now I have a pie chart with a title, right? So then now if you want to add a key, right, which names each slice of the pie, right? So for example, this red part is labeled as 1, but what does that mean, right? What is 1? So this next line of code, I have legend, so the command prompt is legend, and then inside of legend, you're going to put this in quotes, and this is the location that you want the legend to appear, right? And then comma, and then I have a list of the titles, right? And then so notice how those are written, right? So remember, when you're doing the code, it's important to know how to write things in the right order. And then I have comma, and then fill equals, and then what colors we want to fill it with, right? Right. And as we're going through this, right, one thing you want to remember is that I'm trying to show you just some, nice skills to have for the job market. This would be a great thing to talk about in an interview, right? Is to say, hey, like, I took the statistics class at Marion Technical College, and I learned how to use some features in Excel and R in order to present data and work with data, right? That's a very marketable job skill to have, right? But don't stress out about trying to memorize the code, because that is not the focus here, right? I just want you to be able to manipulate code I give you to change it to your specific problem, right? So you don't have to write the code. I'm giving you the code, and you can just tweak it, right? So for example, if you wanted to apply this to a different scenario, right, what you would have to do is you'd have to come up here and change the individual data pieces, right? You could leave the color the same, but you might need to add some or delete some depending on how many categories you had, right? You could change the title and so forth, the category names, right? So you're just changing kind of the items that would be particular to what you're trying to do, and then you could just run the code, right? You wouldn't have to start from scratch, right? So you can just copy and paste the code and manipulate the code, right? Right, so we have that, and I was just saying we can run this legend chart, right? So I have the legend in the top left, right? That's where I told it to go, right? Maybe I want it to go in the top right, right? So I could delete this and type in right, right? So now it says top right, and then I'll run this line, and notice that my key was in the top left, and I added another one to the top right. Now it's in both places, right? So remember, if you only want it in one location, you have to delete this, right? And then we have to go back up to pie and run this, right? Tell R to create a pie chart, and then run the title code to add a title, and then run the legend line to add the key, right? The legend, right? So now I know that the red goes with payroll, the dark blue goes with office supplies, and so forth, right? Alright, so let me close this down, right? So now what I would like to do is show you how to make a bar chart, right? So I can click in bar chart, and I'll run this line, right? So this line of code, right, what I'm telling R is this is the data I want to use. This code is telling R to add a horizontal label, right? Or excuse me, this would be for the vertical label, right? The Y label, so going up and down, right? And then here, let's see, beside equals true, so you don't have to worry about that, right? That's just something you're always going to want inside of here. And then where it says names.arg equals C, what you're doing is you're naming the the horizontal axis, right? So notice here it says expenses, and then comma, and then I have COL equals colors. So that is that's just adding the colors, right, to my categories, right? And so then I can click here in title, and I can run this code, right, and add a title to it, and then I can run the legend code like above, and I can add this key, right? That way I know what each color represents, right? And notice one nice thing about using these expenses and colors for both charts is that everything is consistent, right? So all my labels are in the same order. All my colors are going. That means all my colors are matching to the same labels, the same categories, and then that's all going back to the same order in the data, right? So the order is important here. So then if I make these charts individually, right, I could just right click and click copy as a bitmap or a meta file, right? So I could just copy this and then go back into my Word document, and then I can just paste it, right? And I can resize that or do whatever I would like, right? So forth, right? So I can create each of those charts inside of R, right? And then here, so starting at PAR down, right? So these lines of code is really meant for if you want to play around and go explore this a little deeper. What this code will do is graph each chart side by side, right? So if I close out of this and I run this line of code, right? Then you'll get this, right? So this line of code is telling R to put a pie chart and a bar chart side by side with these tables, and here's my key, right? So this red goes with this red, which is the payroll, right? Everything is consistent. All right. Well, one thing I notice how I labeled this percentage. I probably wouldn't want to label that percentage because these are not referring to percentages. These are actually referring to dollar amounts, right? So if we go back in the code, right, where this says percentage, right, so here, and then also we'd have to change it here if you wanted. We could change this, right, to US dollars, and then I could change it here also. So if you wanted to have that this be consistent, right? So then now if I go in here and see, I'll start running the code at pi. Right, so now I have this pie chart, right? So I can copy this, and remember, it doesn't matter if you do metafile or bitmap. It's not going to make a difference for you. So I can go in here and paste this. So now I have my pie chart, and then here's my bar chart. But remember, I changed the percentage, so I need to delete this, and then I can go back into R and start running the code from bar plot. So I can hit this and then click in title, hit it again, and then legend. So now notice it went from percentages to US dollars, so I can copy this as a meta file, then go back into Word and paste, right? So paste that here, right? And of course you can change the size and whatnot, right? So that's how we can make a bar and pie chart inside of R. Right. So another way that we can make a bar and pie chart is to use Excel, right? So I also have this Excel file uploaded for you. Let's see. Oops. Alright, so on Excel I have, on Canvas I have this Excel document posted there for your reference. So you can just open that up, and I just went ahead and typed our data into Excel. So if I highlight these cells, then I can go up at the top and go to Insert, and I can go to this symbol, which is to insert a pie chart, and I can just pick what kind of pie chart I would like, right? And then I can come up here under Design, and notice if I put my cursor over top, it will change how my my chart appears in the Excel document. So I prefer to have like this dark background, right? So I'll click that. So a couple of things that you might want to edit. So first thing is the title. So the title of our graph, Excel is really smart and tried to make the title of our graph based on what we had typed in Excel, but you might want to edit this, right? So I might want this to be just last month's expenses, right? Alright, so to change this title, right, we can just go in and double click, and then we can edit. So I'd probably just get rid of this part and just call this last month's expenses, right? So we can see the key at the bottom. So this blue color matches the payroll, the gray matches utilities, and so forth, right? But you may want to add some other things. So if you come over up to the top left, add chart and element, you can go in and add whatever you'd like, right? So for example, we could go to data labels, and we could add this data labels however we would like, right? So this data call out could also be percentages and so forth. So you can just play around this and see what you would like to do. Alright, so that's all I have for this video. If you have questions, make sure you send me an email. Thanks. Bye.